Spring is setting up. I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 10th.
Stormsurf, waves, weather, buoys, altimetry, snow, temperatures, El Nino, weather analysis, essential data for outdoor people, all the time, no hype.
Looking at significant wave heights to the North Pacific Ocean, we don't see a whole lot going on. Local winds off of California generating 15-foot seas, and some miscellaneous other areas of, I don't even want to call them fetch, generating some seas, nothing worthy of producing swell, and a early season tropical system trying to get its legs east of the Philippines. But things are winding down in the north, and the focus is definitely turning to the south. But until the south really turns on in earnest, we're going to focus on the north, at least for one more week, this week, and do the usual drill here. All right, starting with jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales. When they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, a dip in the jet, and what we see is a very fragmented, ill-defined jet. The northern branch pushing off of the Kuril Islands, the southern branch pushing off south of south of Japan. The northern branch sort of splits again or merges with the southern branch, and some energy runs up over the Bering Sea, and it's all just a mess. The only trough is this little area here, and what you want to see is a trough, right? A trough pushes to the south. That creates counterclockwise flow aloft and down at the ocean's surface. That is the hallmark of low pressure, and low pressure, if it's deep enough, generates winds, which if they're strong enough generates seas, and seas, if they're strong enough or high enough as they radiate away from the fetch area, eventually turn into swell. But we don't see any of that anywhere. No trough supportive of anything other than this little thing right here off of central Canada, sort of a backdoor trough. There's some weather forecast pushing south into California, attributable to this trough. No swell production, just maybe dragging some cooler air and some moisture down the California coast. We'll take every drop of it we can get. All right, moving forward, as we get into Monday, you can actually see the trough trying to set up over Vancouver Island, pushing down into Washington. Split pattern continues over the bulk of the Pacific. Then on Tuesday, the backdoor trough really, it isn't even over the coast. It's more inland, but maybe just a little bit of moisture is forecast to result as that trough pushes down somewhere over central California, maybe even down to Point Conception if you're lucky, and that's sort of the end of that. We get into Wednesday, still the same sort of deal. The jet split over Japan, fragmented, just nothing really supportive of anything. But notice a bit of a trough tries to organize Thursday in the Gulf of Alaska. No real winds associated with it, and getting even better organized as we get into Friday. And that the idea is that maybe yet another backdoor trough might push into California. And also notice something that almost looks like a trough over the eastern Aleutians. Anyways, we get into Saturday. That trough pushes into, we'll say, the San Francisco Bay Area and maybe the Sierra, and then pushes inland. Again now, as we get into Saturday night, winds looking a little bit more consolidated, maybe starting to dig out a semi-legit trough in the Gulf of Alaska on Sunday. Whatever this does would only be focused on, maybe we'll say, Point Conception and points north of there as we get into later Sunday and into early Monday. But at that point in time, the jet actually starts looking a little bit better. So we haven't written off the northern hemisphere just yet. Going down in the atmosphere, down to the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. Just first glance here, high pressure, 1032 millibars, rotating clockwise. You just see, look at the arrows there. Winds around it, blowing north to south, east to west, clockwise around the core of the high. Low pressure rotates counterclockwise around lower pressure, like right there. Okay, but what we see is local winds along the California coast, maybe 30 knots a bit off the coast, generating wind swell. Nothing really maybe a little tiny area 35 knot winds here off the Kuril Islands, and some sort of a tropical system organizing off the Philippines. Put that into motion as we get into Monday. Still pretty much the same thing. The tropical system moving north. The low over the, we'll call it the North Dateline region with 20-25 knot winds, really doing nothing to generate any sort of swell. You really need minimum 30 and preferably 35 knots, and there's a little tiny thing of 30 knot winds as we get into Tuesday. But again, nothing of interest. The tropical system, all the fetch is aimed at Japan. Nothing at Hawaii, nothing at the U.S. West Coast, at least not yet. We don't really expect it to happen. With La Nina in play, typically these systems do not recurve and head around until maybe very late in the fall, if you're lucky, if all the stars align. But we'll see. You never know. The models and past history are not always a good indicator of what happens. As we get into Wednesday, high pressure fading out along the California coast, but still generally a high pressure pattern in control. Thursday, a little bit of low pressure tries to organize over the North Dateline region, 30-35 knot winds pushing into the Western Gulf as we get into Friday, but also fading out. Tropical system heading north to almost northeast off of Japan. Certainly some swell for that area if all goes as forecast. But the models, certainly this model, not very good going out 4 and 5 days, especially in regards to tropical systems. Saturday, the system theoretically starts recurving northeast. And then, wow, this is new. This is just this run of the model. It's now showing a full recurvature, completely taking back what I said earlier, and heading into the Gulf of Alaska on Monday. Do I believe it? Not a chance, but it's something to watch. Gives us a little bit of maybe something to watch, but the models tease really hard. Half the time this stuff never works out, so for now we're not going to believe it. Significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. The effect of those winds on the ocean surface. Let's see, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 16-foot seas modeled off the central California coast. Good for raw wind swell. That's about it. It's been a blown-out mess. I mean, we've been talking about that in the forecasts on the website, stormsurf.com, and it's pretty much panned out as expected. Otherwise, no real... You really want to see, we'll say 25-foot seas somewhere. No hope of that. What is that? 18.8-foot seas. That's in the tropical system at 13.5 north, 136 west or east. So even that, not particularly interesting. On Monday, no real change. Tuesday, no real change. Wednesday, no real change. Thursday, a little bit of fetch up here generates 19 to 20-foot seas. Okay, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt and say maybe some sideband wind swell into Hawaii and for the U.S. West Coast, but suspect that's probably a bit of a mirage, and then even that fades out. Saturday, the system theoretically starts pushing off to the northeast. Sunday, more of the same, approaching the dateline, and still decent 23, 24-foot seas northwest of Hawaii. We'll see if this pans out. Again, it's more than a week out, and actually some of the models have been showing this system doing this thing as much as maybe 12 or 13 days out. So if this actually materialized, hats off to the Cfs model. It just completely nailed it, but again, we don't think that's going to happen. Looking down south a week ago, Sunday evening, the 3rd of April, little gale developed under New Zealand. Not big, a tiny area of 28 or 29-foot seas were generated, and then moving across the Pacific with seas, what's that, 20, 22, 24, 26-foot seas, even into Wednesday, and then maybe a little bit more due south of California with 31-foot seas before it pushed east of the Southern California swell window at about 118 west. Swell is in the water. Forecast to arrive in Hawaii, I believe it's tomorrow, and maybe in the U.S. West Coast on Wednesday. Nothing huge, just 2 foot at 15 seconds kind of thing. Rideable, though. We'll take it. And the wind swell should be dying down. We'll get into that in a minute. And anyway, looking beyond, so yeah, there was a gale down here in the far southeast Pacific, but again, out of the U.S. swell window, and it was falling southeast. Another system, we're looking at yesterday, developed southeast of New Zealand. Little area of 20, 5-foot seas maybe. Now let's go look at the forecast. Those were all seas that have already happened. Again, swell is in the water, radiating north from that. The second system pretty much fading out, not doing anything as we get into Monday. And then a bit of a slack pattern for a little bit. But again, if you believe the models, a pretty decent, small, compact, but fairly reasonable system on Friday evening developed south of New Zealand, 41-foot seas, and building to 42-foot to 43 feet about midday Saturday, so that's 6 days from now, and actually lifting a bit to the northeast. We're going to play this. Let's go back and just look at this whole thing. So there's the track there starting east, and you watch it just slowly lift northeast as we get into Sunday night a week from now. If that were to happen, some decent swell could radiate certainly for Tahiti, into Hawaii, and certainly Central America, South America, and the U.S. West Coast. That would be a clear indication of the demise of winter and the start of summer, unless, of course, that tropical system up north actually develops, which would be somewhere around the same time. So things to look at, both north and south. We'll take anything we can get at this point. So here's the main swell producing event, high pressure. We don't ever talk about high pressure producing swell, but certainly high pressure can produce winds, certainly if it's strong enough, and it forms a gradient sometimes with low pressure nearby it. Winds 30 knots off of the north and central California coast, we'll say 25 to 30 knots, generating very raw local wind swell. Also notice the whole south quadrant of this high is generating northeast to easterly fetch, pushing into Hawaii, generating wind swell that is working its way into east-facing shores and wrapping around, maybe some into the north shore and some into the south shore at select spots. That continues, but weaker as we get into Monday and Tuesday, including California. The pressure gradient actually fades, and then Wednesday, new low pressure builds off of North California, create maybe another opportunity for some precip. Trades continue for the Hawaiian Islands. Wind swell starts faltering for California, though. Thursday, wind swell out, except for Hawaii. Then Friday, maybe another little low off the coast, and here comes building high pressure also as we get into Saturday. There's your wind swell machine for next weekend. Trades also picking up for the Hawaiian Islands. So again, just wind swell, wind swell, wind swell. That is not unexpected given springtime, especially in La Nina years. La Nina actually feeds high pressure, and during spring, that's when high pressure really sets up. The Gulf high pressure system sets up, and then you get lots of raging north winds, lots of upwelling cold water temperatures, but at least there's wind swell, and that typically will hold into the June or even July time frame, and then the high pressures start moderating as you start moving into this slack period. But for now, it's wind swell is better than nothing until we get southern hemi swell or until some fluke of a northern hemi swell develops as well. All right, precipitation potential. California right here. San Francisco Bay Area, Southern California, LA, somewhere down around there. Put this into motion because we know something is happening. Here's this little low forecast Sunday evening. So we get into Monday, pushes down the coast. The blues are precipitations, yellows and whites are snow into Tahoe about midday Monday, continuing actually pretty decent amount of snow theoretically for the whole Sierra as we get into Monday afternoon, but then quickly clearing out in the evening. Another little low forecast Tuesday night into Wednesday. It needs reinforcement from a secondary low, and that pushes down to, let's see, the Bay Area, maybe Santa Cruz with light snow for the Sierra, and then it fades out. That's on Thursday night. And then theoretically, maybe one other little pulse with snow into the Tahoe area, and then down the Sierra, Friday into Saturday, and then that fades out. And then you see yet more building in the Gulf of Alaska. Now, one would not be, it would not be fair to say this is going to be some sort of a miracle April, but anything, if we could pull off like 2 or 3 feet of snow in the Sierra, and maybe a ½ inch to an inch of rain down into at least Santa Cruz area, that would be a blessing. A lot of that will all melt off and run off. It'll all end up in the reservoirs, but that's good for our water levels for the coming season. The snow forecast dashboard for Olympic Valley. This is most interesting. 37 inches of snow forecast from 3 different systems over the next week. Actually, it's, well, yeah, the 10th through the 16th, 6 days. So interesting. Let's see, about 24 hours ago, this was showing over like 110 inches. This morning, it went down to 48. Then it went down to 2 feet. Now it's back up to 3 feet of snow. So some sort of event is going to come. How much? And the timing, still pretty solid. I mean, that hasn't changed. But how much? Very much up in the air. Kirkwood forecast with about maybe 40, 41 inches. But Mammoth far less, maybe about 8 inches. The issue is all these systems are backdoor fronts. They're falling from north to south. And the further south they go, the more the moisture gets wrung out of them. And the sort of the jet stream is pushing more inland. And there's just much less support for precipitation the further down the sea area you get. So this mainly looks, whatever it's going to be, is going to be a Tahoe and that area, maybe down to Kirkwood style event. We're not going to talk about snow levels. The models are having some problems. There's been an issue at the National Weather Service Data Center, and I think they're still trying to sort out some of the issues. But at least for the most part, we have reasonably good data. All right, let's go take a look long term. What's going on with Madden Julian Oscillation? That short-term weather indicator we use, maybe good for a month outlook forecast. And then the El Nino Southern Oscillation, that we can look out maybe up to a year and get at least a rough guideline of what might develop as we get into next winter. All right, so first we're going to look for signs of the active phase of the MJO, the Madden Julian Oscillation. There's 2 phases, active and inactive. When the active phase is on one side of the planet, the inactive phase on the other, they rotate around the planet from west to east on the equator. The active phase is effectively a low pressure system. When it moves over the Pacific, and it takes about 4 to 5 weeks to traverse from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, it actually imparts energy to the jet stream, both in the northern hemi and the southern hemi. That in turn feeds energy to the jet stream, which then can support trough development and support storm development, which produces waves. What it also does is it reduces trade winds where the active phase is over the Pacific, and that in turn can actually reverse trade winds and allow warm water that's balled up over in the West Pacific to start traversing under the equator across the Pacific and then eventually erupting off Ecuador, creating a warm slick there. Successive active phases of the MJ, if they're strong enough, create multiple Kelvin waves, which can significantly alter the balance of warm water in the Pacific. That can in turn then help kick off El Nino. Right now, though, we are in La Nina. But, okay, let's go look at some data. Current, the way we normally do is the site that we normally look at is down, but we can start with this chart anyway. All right, whole planet on one chart. We're looking for either our trades weaker or stronger than normal. The purples here are trades that are more out of the east, stronger than normal. The reds, more out of the west. Okay, this would be the inactive phase of the MJO. This would be the active phase of the MJO. So where are we? Here's the date line. This is the whole planet on one chart. So 180 is the date line. The far west Pacific is about 135 east, so right about there. California is about 120, and Ecuador is about 80 west, something right there. But it's the west Pacific we're most interested in. That's where all the energy gets imparted to the jet stream. That's where Kelvin waves are produced. That's where you get the start of El Nino. So we will monitor there from about 135 east to about 170 west. We call it the Kelvin wave generation area. So we can see back in March, west anomalies, active phase of the MJO. This was in the Indian Ocean. It moved into the Pacific about the end of March. You can see it right here. It's been sort of backtracking, but still pretty solid, strong winds, filling 50% or more, 60% of the Kelvin wave generation area. As of today, though, that's probably the end of it. The westerly anomalies forecast backtracking to right about the hairy edge of the far west Pacific. East anomalies, taking over, not particularly strong, but present. That would probably prevent or at least stop whatever Kelvin wave production was happening here, if any, from digging any deeper. Like I said, the active phase of the MJO is like a low pressure system, and low pressure systems generate clouds. So this model, this goes out 2 weeks, it's just an indicator of where is there more cloud cover or less cloud cover than normal. They call it outgoing long wave radiation. That is sunlight bouncing off the ocean's surface, reflecting back out into space. If you have more clouds, you get less reflectivity off the ocean, and that's an indicator of the active phase of the MJO. Right, so first panel here, EQ, that's the equator. South America, Central America, Hawaii, New Guinea, right there, the date line. Kelvin wave generation area from 135 east, 5 degrees north and south of the equator to 170 west. So right there, we see blues. That is more clouds than normal, the active phase of the MJO, in sync with what we saw in the previous model. That holds for another 5 days, fades a little 10 days out, and then is gone 15 days, 2 weeks from now, per the statistic model. The dynamic model, though, a little bit more favorable, suggesting basically the same as the statistic model, but with the active phase hanging around a full 2 weeks. We'll take that. That's a good thing. That would impart energy to the jet stream, both north and southern hemisphere. And since we know there's already something on the charts, well, this might be just what is driving the storm development, potential storm development in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Next up, phase diagrams. Same, just a different way to look at the same two models, statistic model and the dynamic model. So the MJO moves from west to east, from the Indian Ocean over the maritime continent, that's like Bali, to the West Pacific, to the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over Africa, back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot right there is where the active phase is, so it's in the Western Pacific. That's good. But the further the dot is away from this circle, the stronger the active phase is. The dot's actually in the circle, so that means it's extremely weak. And the 3 forecast tracks here have the MJO moving to, we'll say, somewhere in the Atlantic 2 weeks from now. All of them contained with all these 3 tracks within the circle, so still exceedingly weak. Dynamic model, pretty much the same thing. Maybe the MJO peaking up to what I'll call weak status in the West Pacific about 5 or 6 days from now, then making its way across over into the Atlantic, and pretty weak. So not a robust active phase at all. The upper level model showing areas favorable for precipitation. The green's favorable, the red's not. So the greens would be active phase, yellows and oranges inactive phase. 8 different panels, goes out 40 days. South America, Central America, 0 is the equator. There's Philippines, New Guinea, dateline, roughly somewhere out there. Active phase of the MJO over the West Pacific now, making its way across the Pacific into about the end of April. And then somewhere around mid to late April, the inactive phase sets up, makes its way across the Pacific through the middle of May. And then the active phase of the MJO shows up again as we get into about the early part of May and makes its way across. The interesting part here is now we're back to kind of a regular rhythm, which is good. For the past 2 years, nary an active phase was to be found, and when it showed up, it was an anomaly. But now it's active, inactive, active. You can see inactive setting there. So this sort of suggests that the La Nina pattern that we're in is breaking down, and that a return to a more normal cadence of active and inactive phases the MJO is setting up. That's a good thing. And then the CFS model going out 1 month. Again, this is the east and west component of the wind. The blues, the easterly anomalies, consider that the inactive phase. The reds, the active phase. Looking back in time, in January, you can see this just persistent blue pattern up until about March 26th. Just steady inactive phase of the MJO. The dotted contours here, that actually is the inactive phase. Solid contours, that's the active phase. You see, we really didn't have any legit active phase at all until just as we started getting into mid-March. It made its way across the Pacific. It is done in the Pacific now. Theoretically, though, it sort of suggests maybe some remnant of the active phase still holding on until maybe the end of April, something like that. The reds, westerly anomalies, this was sort of our Kelvin wave producing, and maybe a second little spurt of that, maybe starting 5 days from now, with westerly anomalies making it to about 60% of the way across the Kelvin wave generation area, then fading out with the inactive phase at the end of April starting to take over with easterly anomalies building. And then finally, the 3-month CFS model. All right, 850 millibar winds, but which is about 4,700 feet up, the east-west component of the wind. This is past performance here. This is the forecast in the future. Looking in the past, we see in the very early part of January, the yellows and reds here are westerly anomalies. So there was a bit of an active phase of the MJO, it looks like, back then. Maybe that created a Kelvin wave. Well, we know it did, because that Kelvin wave is all but finishing up in the East Pacific now. We'll get into that in a minute. Big area of easterly anomalies, and the last little bit of it is occurring right now, maybe not even a week's worth, maybe another 4 days worth. Then after that, you can see a definitive pattern shift. Easterly anomalies persist, but they move. California's at 120. They're centered right over and just off the coast of California, maybe making it to Hawaii, but a westerly wind pattern sets up over from the date line, maybe even a little bit past that one, almost filling the Kelvin wave generation area. That's what it looks like. Let's overlay some data here and see what's going on. All right, the red solid contours, the active phase of the MJO. So there was one back in December, January, created that little burst of westerly anomalies there that created a Kelvin wave. We had an inactive phase. Now the active phase, again, here's 135 east is the far west Pacific. So this active phase started reaching the far west Pacific in February, but it kind of stalled. La Nina just wouldn't give up. Now the active phase is making its way across. Still, easterly anomalies trying to hang on, but within the next couple of days, westerly anomalies pretty much fill the Kelvin wave generation area. Beyond that, an inactive phase sets up from, well, let's say about March 1st to about June 13th, something like that. But westerly anomalies, or at least neutral anomalies, set up. This is really going to be a good test of, are we in a pattern shift? If we get raging easterly anomalies and this does not verify, then we'll know La Nina is maybe still going to hang around. But the model has been persistently suggesting that no major easterly wind anomaly event is to happen. Then, of course, another active phase forecast after that, starting about the end of May and going into July or later. All right, let's overlay the low-pass filter here. This is sort of a high pressure, low pressure. Where is it situated in the Pacific? Well, all last winter, high pressure, this dotted contour, this is the La Nina indicator, was over the date line. No wonder we didn't have much of a winter in terms of surf. No wonder the jet stream just didn't produce a whole lot, and our number of big surf days or even moderate surf days were kind of on the low side. But you notice the leading edge of this is to slowly start working its way off to the east and be effectively at the date line or even east of that in the next, as we get into early May, while this, the low pressure bias, we'll call this the El Nino indicator, the storm indicator, the storm producer, which has been locked in the Indian Ocean actually for 2 years, the leading edge of it has already started to ease east and is forecast to make a bigger easterly move over the next month, pushing solidly into the Kelvin wave generation area. And you notice where this line is and everything behind it, that's where the westerly anomalies are. Where this dotted contour is the high pressure line, that's where all the easterly anomalies are. So the objective here is to get this solid low pressure bias line to move deeper into the Pacific, because when that happens, then you get support for the jet stream, storm development, precipitation, and all this high pressure drought thing that's going on in California and lack of waves. It's all tied in together. That will start to break down. The sooner this happens, the better. All right, next up, subsurface temperatures. We see the animation going here. Watch right there. That's a cold pool that's been recently developing at about 140, but the latest frame of that has it significantly backing off. The other part to note, here is a previous Kelvin wave, warm water pushing from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. Notice it is starting to creep to the east as well. So it was back here, and now just the past couple of frames, you see it moving. So this is subsurface temperature profile. West Pacific here, East Pacific here. The oranges and the reds warmer than normal. The blues colder than normal. So we had a Kelvin wave, you saw it previously, pushing across the Pacific. Warm water. The Kelvin waves, not on the surface, under the surface. Push across the Pacific. They hit here. This is the remnant of a previous Kelvin wave that's finishing, wrapping up now. And potentially a new Kelvin wave with, what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 4+ degrees above normal temperatures, working their way off to the east. So this is potentially a good sign. The westerly anomalies that we talked about, the active phase of the MJO that's just been happening the past couple of weeks, appears to be setting this pool of warm water in motion off to the east. Again, successive active phases of the MJO can create successive Kelvin waves, and successive Kelvin waves, if they hold and have enough duration, can help kick us into El Nino. We don't think that's going to happen, but certainly this will help to kick us into a more normal pattern. Sea level anomaly data. There's good news here as well. Let's just get ourselves oriented. Chile, South America, Peru, Central America, Baja, why there? Dateline right there, equator right there, New Guinea right there. This is not temperature data. This is the height of the ocean. Strip away the wave heights, wind waves, and the tide, and is the sphere of the ocean higher or lower than normal? Warm water at depth expands. That'll create a bump. It'll take the water above it, create a bump on the ocean surface. Cold water at depth will contract, and it'll create a divot on the ocean surface. All right, so the remnants of our previous Kelvin wave, here's Ecuador. See the positive anomalies here, suggesting lingering warm water there. But negative anomalies, minus 5 centimeters, 10 centimeters. That's at 10 centimeters of ocean height. What's that, like that or something? Right there at 140 west. Now, the interesting part again, like what we were seeing previously, this was minus 15 a couple of days ago. It's backed off. We're kind of watching this warm water here now to see if it starts, these positive anomalies start pushing off to the east. Also, the interesting thing that's going on here, and I'm not sure what is happening, but you see positive anomalies strung a line, a little like just a finger working their way in here. Normally, if there was a Kelvin wave at depth, you'd see it coming right here. But there seems to be some sort of a back eddy flow or something working its way. There actually is a counter current that runs north of the equator. It seems to be dragging, with westerly anomalies associated, it seems to be dragging warm water off to the east. That, in conjunction with a Kelvin wave, could help us move in the right direction. Upper ocean heat anomalies. This is just a column of water 300 meters deep the whole way across the Pacific on the equator. This is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here. You got time going down almost a year. We had 1, 2, 3 Kelvin waves last summer into about July, and they died. Easterly anomalies started nuking and had 1, 2, 3 upwelling events. Cold water set up in the East Pacific. The date line's like right there. Okay, you see Kelvin waves that tried to get going and never made it, right? It's just nuking easterly anomalies. Then in December, early January, we had a Kelvin wave. I mean, a active phase of the MJO that created a Kelvin wave. You see warm water moving from west to east there. Then here was that little cool pool, and it peaked here. What was that, about maybe 2 weeks ago? But you can see it clearly fading. And then again, here's this warm water starting to move off to the east. It's making to about 164 west right now, which is about, it's actually further than either one of these two false Kelvin waves made it. So we're in the active phase of the MJO, and there have been westerly anomalies this whole time. So we're thinking maybe, just maybe, we're seeing the start of another Kelvin wave. I think it's going to be a very weak one if it is one, but any sort of warm water to break up the cold water pattern for real, that's what we want to see. All right, let's go up to the surface. See surface temperature anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. South America here, Chile, Peru. Central America, California up there, Hawaii, the equator roughly here. The blues colder than normal temperatures. Clearly, La Nina pattern in control, but this is the warm water from that previous Kelvin wave we were talking about. This Kelvin wave right here that traversed the whole way across the Pacific, 80 west, that's where Ecuador is. And there's Ecuador there. That warm water erupted to the surface. It gets caught by the trades. High pressure here in the North Pacific, high pressure in the South Pacific, drags the warm water across the Pacific. And it's out to, what is that, about 135 west, something like that. And it actually looks like this pool of warm water is starting to break up some. No, not unexpected. It wasn't a huge Kelvin wave or anything, but anything to try to push us into a more neutral kind of pattern. The coldest of the cold waters appear to be out here somewhere from about 135 right there. Let pocket some of these pockets here. Maybe we're reading a little bit too much into this, but most of the cold water, the remnants of La Nina, appear to be more in the central Pacific now. Sea surface temperature trend for the past 7 days. South America, Central America, Hawaii, the equator right there. The blues, water getting colder over the past 7 days. So you can see it off of Ecuador, the Galapagos, and right there, that Kelvin wave starting to fade out. The remnant warm water from the Kelvin wave being caught by the trades, drifting over the far, we'll call it the Central Pacific, warming things slightly, but not a whole lot. Again, everything is on the equator. Temperature changes up here and down here, they matter, but really what's driving the jet stream is what's happening in this area, and specifically over here. But you also need, if you really want El Nino, you have to have warm water here. That drags the center of the Walker circulation. We're not going to get into that today. But basically, that can get you westerly anomalies pushing the whole way across the Pacific. And then you're into major jet stream changes when that happens. And that's, of course, El Nino. Sea surface temperatures in the Nino 1.2 region. This is the area right there by the Galapagos in Ecuador. As expected, starting to fall. 628 thousandths of a degree below normal. Half a degree below normal. In the El Nino regions, which this is not, is a La Nina indicator. You can see even in this out of the main region area, temperatures have been colder than normal. We only got above normal just for, 2 weeks right there, and now we're starting to dive back down. The official El Nino region, the Nino 3.4 region, the area from a point south of California out to about the dateline. Temperatures today, 3/4 of a degree below normal, 734 thousandths of a degree. And we were at minimum, almost reaching into normal territory for about 2 days of this entire year, and that's it. So still, La Nina definitely in play, but you get the sense of a slow, steady upward trend going on. Not huge, not marked, but definitely a push, at least in the right direction. So what does the atmosphere think is going on? We've talked about temperatures down in the ocean, right? And then we've talked about temperatures at the ocean surface, and it's really, so the temperatures down in the ocean and the movement of cold and warm water give us an indication of what might be happening 3 months out at the surface. Temperatures at the surface, they're interfacing with the atmosphere directly above it, and they give us an indication of what is happening right now. So, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, which is basically the Indian Ocean, and Tahiti, which is in the Central Pacific. If the pressure is falling relative to Darwin, then you get a negative index, but you notice we're positive, 21.41 today. You just scan down here, we were up to 31.8 4 or 5 days ago. And looking back, we've been positive for a long time. Again, an indicator of La Nina, but this is kind of noisy. The 30-day average of that, still, we've been moving, we were down to 8.55 in March, and now we're up to 12.9. So sort of an indicator of the inactive phase of the MJO, if anything. The 90-day average is your El Nino La Nina indicator. It's positive too at 10.02. And scrolling down, it's actually higher now than it's been at any point in the winter. I mean, I guess it's better having it now than in the dead of January. I mean, we got at least a little something out of our winter, but this is not moving in the right direction either. So the atmosphere still thinks La Nina is going on for sure. The ocean is not quite sure. It wants the MJO thing seems to be trying to do something, but it's not quite there yet. I think in the next week or two is really going to be the teller. Again, we're in the spring unpredictability barrier, so some of this stuff is kind of hard to know how it's going to play out. Here's the 30-day average graphed out. Okay, here we are today at about, actually I think it was about 0.10 or 12, something like that. This index is a little bit higher. You get the distinct impression, though, from April a year ago till now that we're back on the rising trend. Last January 2021, that was the peak, the initial peak of La Nina, and then our peak of the second peak of La Nina, somewhere right around here. It's actually occurring now, still lower than that, but really we don't want to be seeing this at all. I want to see this index heading towards neutral, and it's not doing that. And then finally, the forecast from the CFS version 2 model, sea surface temperature anomalies in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. All right, so today temperatures somewhere around a degree below normal. This model says dropping to minus 1.4 degrees in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Then somewhere stabilizing right about a degree below normal going into fall. That would still clearly be La Nina territory. The minus half a degree is where you need to be in this region. This model, a little bit not trustworthy. They have a PDF corrected version of it, but it's showing temperatures hovering somewhere around 3/4 of a degree, something like that. Still clearly in La Nina territory. Now, in the past couple of videos, we've looked at some of the other models. They're saying, well, we'll return to a neutral pattern in the next couple of months. Maybe this model knows something the other models don't know. Again, the spring unpredictability barrier we talked about runs from about now into the end of May into early June, something like that. So the models have a hard time deciphering out exactly what's going to happen. And you can see just looking at everything, well, there is definitely a tendency in the atmosphere to support La Nina right now. But there's also some things going on that say, well, maybe the fundamentals aren't going to hold, and maybe we'll move towards a neutral pattern. So for right now, I mean, clearly spring's in control. High pressure, nuking north winds, lots of wind swell in control, at least for North and Central California, and also for the east shores of the Hawaiian Islands. Small southern hemiswell is coming, though. It's due to arrive in Hawaii tomorrow, and a little bit of energy working its way into Southern California and maybe expose breaks up into Northern California by Wednesday, Thursday, Friday sort of thing. The Southern Hemi, though, looking like it's trying to wake up, maybe another pulse after that, and then maybe something even stronger if one is to believe the models. At the same time, North Pacific asleep. But if that tropical system in the far West Pacific does actually recurve, which seems highly unlikely, and does rebuild in the Gulf of Alaska, well, hey, maybe we could have another pulse of swell. We're not holding our breath on that. Beyond that, well, we're still, again, spring unpredictability barrier. We don't know whether we're moving to El Nino or La Nina. We're hoping, the best we can hope for, honestly, is just get to a neutral or even a negative temperature, but in the neutral range, half degree below normal as we get into fall. But it's just way too early to know anything to give us a better precipitation outlook and a better jet stream outlook for next fall. We'll just have to wait and see on that. But we're watching every little detail and every update, hoping for a sign of life. All right, if you enjoyed the video, give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it. Please subscribe. Just click the Stormsurf logo down there in the lower right-hand corner, and you can subscribe to automatic notifications when we post the video. If not, go to stormsurf.com. All the data you saw tonight is there. You can follow along during the week and then watch the video and check your knowledge against what we post. Comments, questions, post them right now. Go ahead. We will do our best to answer, and sometimes we get some pretty good questions here and get a good discussion going. All right. Thanks for joining. We will do this again next week, same time, same channel. Thanks for watching. See you then. Bye.